Hello and welcome to TechSavvy. Today we have with us Aleksandar Mihaylov, Technology Manager Front-End at Scalefocus. And the topic that we'll discuss is technology hypes and hype cycles in the tech industry, which seems to be one of the driving factors of the whole industry for the past at least 30 years. Sasha, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, of course, Krasi. As you said, my name is Aleksandar Mihaylov. I'm a technology manager at Scalefocus. I mostly do front end right now, but I've been in the industry for 16 years, around 16 years, I think. And I've done a lot of things. I've done backend, I've done C++. So I think we can have like a very good discussion here today.
Yeah, both of us have a number of years in the industry. I've been professionally involved since 2004, so that makes 20 years now. And I've seen some of the hype cycles that we'll talk about today. So let's give a brief introduction of what is a hype cycle, because some of our viewers or listeners might not be familiar with that term. The original term was coined by Gartner, so they noticed that there is a few things that constantly happen with new technologies, new developments, not just in terms of technology, in social aspects, in other terms as well, but the hype cycle goes as follow. There is an innovation breakthrough, which opens the gates to new possibilities with new technologies in our case. Then there is the upward trend of basically the hype slope, the slope of inflated expectations, as they call it. Then there is the trough of disillusionment. Basically, the whole hype dies down, and there is a dip in popularity in the thing that caused the hype. Then there is again a new peak that basically takes the popularity up, and because actual use cases and actual business cases are found for the thing, and then there is the plateau of stability, the so-called plateau of productivity, as Gartner calls it, where basically there is the necessary level of penetration of a technology in businesses, in whatever, and it's roughly stays the same because there is a dynamic balance there in the system. And I do believe that there are some aspects behind that happen after the whole hype cycle, but we'll talk about those today as well. So when we say hype, can you give a few examples of recent hypes and how they went? And yeah.
Yeah, so to get that out of the way, so let's start with the AI hype, right?
Yeah.
So this is the most recent one. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but we do have AI and neural networks and whatever actually for quite some time. I mean, they are everywhere, in ads, in chats, in whatever, everything public, social media mainly. The hype here happened, in my opinion, basically is with the recent developments with large language models, right? But again, this happened because of popularity, right? Something that you mentioned in your introduction. But what what the outcome from that is basically that there is a lot of people that think that one single technology is going to solve every problem that they have. I think that is like a repeating constant in every hype cycle, right?
Yeah, and we are programmed to believe that a single technology or a breakthrough can change everything. We are sold the myth of the lone inventor, the genius that invents one thing or a couple of things, they change the world, and so on and so forth. The reality, and by the way, that's the reality now, because hype cycles are with us since pretty much humanity exists. And to give an example, engineer comes from engine, which basically means steam engine. short for steam engine. 19th century was, although the steam engine wasn't invented in the 19th century, it was widely implemented in railroads and building railway systems, and it was the revolution of the 19th century, and it was the hype. A lot of people invested. There was a bubble, not dissimilar from what we see today with various other technologies. So there are various hypes, and right now we are living in an era that has a bit of a different, basically the whole socio-economic conditions are different, because first we have mass media, and we can get news pretty quickly. We get targeted media, something that wasn't the case 20 years ago. That targeted media helps the hypes even more. We are living in a more complex, as I said, socio-economic condition, because all the hypes, at least the relevant hypes from the past, as I mentioned, railways and engines, steam engines. So although we don't use steam engines nowadays for railway engines, but we use them to produce electricity, by the way. So the whole hype, it stays with us. We have it still today. We have railroads. We still have steam engines that we produce pretty much most of our electricity, regardless if it's nuclear, thermal power. It's still steam turbines that produce the electricity. We have the technology with us still, although it's not the hype, but it creates a more complex environment in which former hypes intertwine and act together. And in sometimes they create, actually former hypes create the necessary conditions for new hypes. To give an example, we wouldn't have the AI hype. Why do we have it now? Because for the first time in humanity's history, we have the necessary data in the necessary quantities with the necessary quality, and we have it we have the computational power to execute huge models with billions of parameters, and that wasn't possible before cloud. So and cloud and big data gave us because we have AI for, I don't know, at least since the 40s and the 50s conceptually.
Yes.
But now there is this term emergent properties. When you have enough interactions of simpler mechanisms, simpler parts in a system, they give rise to something more complex that's not necessarily built into the parts of the system. So yeah.
Yeah, so you did mention, like, that was one example, right? This is the most recent example with AI. You did mention cloud, because cloud was also on the hype line, on the hype a while back. The thing that is actually interesting that you mentioned is the social aspect of building a hype, right? And because it's not all technology related, right? When we talk about hypes, currently we talk about technology, and that is mainly because in recent years, well, in the recent 20 years, basically, we had a huge boom in technology, and most of those hypes basically happened there. But it's happening from a social perspective. If we look at it, and this is my opinion actually. So why a hype actually happens? What you mentioned, there are certain times that hypes happen because there are a lot of intervening, emerging technologies that combine to build something new, to build something great, right? But is that thing actually great? It's not tested. I mean, it's been experimented with. It shows good results. It is being presented to the broader audience, right? And then comes the social aspect of the thing. So I think it's from some perspective it is psychological, right? So because our minds are built in a way that basically they look for the shortest route to something. So if you look at it that way, so basically AI, you see it hyped up mainly because a lot of people see a solution for their problems there and see an easy solution. to some extent. So this is partially a problem, partially it's normal to have. But if you look at like historically, again, as you mentioned, cloud. Again, cloud was hyped up mainly because it solved a lot of the solutions. You need more performance. You just do a slider, right? You need more machines. You need compute for complex computations, right? You can get it from the cloud. And then again, this is again solving problems the easy way, right? This is what the hype is. And if you look at it a little bit like on a different angle, because for instance, the crypto hype, the blockchain hype, right? If you look at it, it's a bit different. It's not a technology that solves a lot. But I don't know, this is my opinion, but it does solve some things, and those things are financial, if you look at it. So basically a lot of the IPOs are built for like financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that brought forward some Ponzi schemes as well. But yeah, it is something that I think stands at the base of every hype. I don't know if that's your opinion or not.
So I believe there are a few different types of hypes, and sometimes they feed on each other, like with blockchain, because it started. Most of the hypes actually start with a technology that gives us solutions that we didn't have, or is vastly superior to what we have. For example, if you compare a steam engine versus what a horse can draw, and by the way, still the railway gauges are based on how wide was the average bottom of a donkey, by the way, because they were used first in the mines, and 2 donkeys needed to walk above the 2 basically rails. So we still have everything. Basically, you have a hype that comes from solving a problem much better that we still have, or that gives you entirely new possibilities. Sometimes you start with solving a problem like scalability, security, whatever with cloud. So and it grows into an ecosystem. Another thing that cloud gave us is the ability for all those startups to start with pretty much a handful of people, not worry about the infrastructure, reach the entire world almost immediately because of cloud and because of not dealing with that infrastructure. But there is another aspect, which is the financial aspect of hype. And we have, again, since the beginning of time, the tulip crisis or the tulip craze back in the day, even Isaac Newton lost money on that. Basically, it was you buy like tulips, but the price is always going up and blah 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 blah. At some point, it crashed. So it had nothing to do with a new solution, with a better solution, with nothing. Just you have something that seems to go up in price exponentially, constantly, and you don't want to miss out. So sometimes technology development, such as blockchain, and I do believe that blockchain has some possibilities to solve problems in better ways. For example, and it hasn't given us that, by the way, still. It can give us like free, transparent, secure, and also anonymous online voting, for example, something that we cannot solve with the usual computing and so on. The problem is it was used for a lot of things. By the way, one of the ways you can see that there is a hype, by the way, is if you see more something that everyone is talking about, but they're trying to find a problem for that something. Basically, hey, can we do we're on the same page with AI right now. How can you find it out? You start seeing more and more top-level domains. So .ai, .whatever, blah blah blah. That means you're at the top of the hype, because companies get funding just because they have their domain.ai in this case. But in blockchain, the same thing. It solves some problems and actually opens ways for new solutions. It's pretty narrow in the class of problems that it solves, actually. But it gave a way for this financial aspect of the whole thing, like with the tulips back in the day and many other times. .NET, the .com bubble is another. Yeah. It was a legit technology. It gave us the world that we live in today. It gave us cloud and all the other stuff that we talked about, but the problem was that it became a huge hype and everyone was registering .com companies and it crashed at the end of the day.
Well, it correlates to what you said again in the beginning, right? So one technology, while it's been like worked with, like hyped, as we said, it's been experimented in any different in very different ways, right? Until it basically gets the productivity line or plateau that you mentioned, and it becomes stable. It's being used for, let's say, the purpose that mainly it has to be used. Mm-hmm. So again, AI is going to change how we do things. That's not out of the question. It is going to happen. But it is going to take some time to understand how basically AI works and how it can be integrated into solving specific problems in specific areas. And that's not always business, right? It's medicine, and it has a lot of applications. And it is something that that is going to be used both for good and both for bad. I mean, it's already been used for bad. Mainly that is the first thing that everybody does. But it is going to be used, I foresee actually be used in healthcare a lot. Blockchain again, it did change the fintech industry, for instance. It became more secure to some extent.
Yep.
Cloud also changed the way we look at software, how we deploy software. We did because of cloud. We do have like all these different roles right now that basically manage a very complex application, right? That can handle millions and millions of users, and it's secure, and its data is not like easy to breach, mm-hmm. and so on. So all these hypes actually did their job and did their job well. But during that period where it's been experimented with, there are a lot of things that are happening like that are not very productive. I mean, they're counterproductive actually.
Yeah. Actually, the biggest change that I think blockchain brought to the, especially the financial industry as a whole, and again, it's too broad of a term, but together maybe with open banking, it led to a lot of startups and investments in innovation in finance in general. Not that everyone's running blockchain right now or whatever, but it led to the so-called new banks that are branchless, mobile first, like Revolut, yeah. for example, and others, which changed a lot of things. People started thinking in a new way to bank with your phone and with a fixed fee and not paying for every transaction or whatever, and basically changed the rules of the game because they were pretty much thought of as set in stone and didn't change for a long period of time. So blockchain gave focus of innovators into an industry that otherwise might not be so thoroughly explored. Although blockchain itself didn't change dramatically anything in how banking happens, I believe it contributed to acceleration in change in banking, definitely. And that's the side effect, by the way, of a lot of hypes. They don't necessarily achieve in all the promises that they give, but they have good side effects. Usually they create diversity, competition, and so on, which is always good for the end users. By the way, not all the hypes reach the the hype status and the stratosphere and have the chance to actually go into the trough of disillusionment. Can you give some examples of hypes that didn't make it to real hype status?
Uh, well, probably VR is something that still needs work. I mean, there are a lot of things that basically are being done in that direction, but I still think they're not there. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be ironed out before, let's say, VR or VR headsets or whatever can be used like business-wise, productively, and even for gaming, right? And these are things that basically big companies have been trying to push. And we know historically that big companies basically try to push the hype. They try to create the hype wave,
Yeah.
not ride it, right? Most of the time. I think we're still not there. There is a lot of work to be done there. Maybe sometime it will be, but it didn't take off as a lot of people like expected to. Again, if I have to go back with blockchain, I think it didn't take off as expected as well. I mean, I think that the technology has future, and it will be used in the future because the technology is pretty interesting. It can solve a lot of problems, like, as you said, smart contracts, like to verify the where something has come from. Like even those smart contracts that I mean, not in the context of blockchains, but smart contracts on let's say the like buying a car. I buy a car from you, and I can take a look and I can see where you bought that car from,
Yeah.
and whatever, and the next person will see the same thing, right? And everybody will know, yeah, he owns this car. I mean, it's not paper, it is in the blockchain.
One of the things that I think blockchain has to offer is basically digitalizing notary deals, but I don't think all the necessary elements were there for the hype to really take off.
Yes.
Because the major thing that we're lacking to make, for example, smart contracts work, the technology is there. The problem is we don't have digital identity in most countries developed and adopted by the majority of the population. So how do you really prove to the government and so on, and to the other buyer that you are indeed you, and they're into actual contractual relationship with you specifically, how you can be accountable for the things that you take as part of that contractual relationship. All the legislative part is not there to recognize such deals and so on. And it's an issue that I believe in a few years' time we might start talking again about smart contracts in the term that we can definitely we can buy a house online and the notary deal might be processed online with our digital identity, whatever. But the problem is we lack pieces to get everything done.
There are a lot of problems also to be solved in the whole like decentralized like blockchain. Because decentralization means that basically you have different verifiers for that contract, and those verifiers can be anyone currently. I mean, that is can be anyone, and that is not something that, let's say, a government or a legal agency can like stand behind. There are actually a lot of things that need to be think about, thought of, engineered, right? But that doesn't mean that that the technology doesn't have a future. I can give you an example actually. I don't know if you are aware that the first, let's call it smartphone, right, or smart device was actually created way before Apple was actually created. I don't know what it was called. I think it was actually around the time that that Apple and Microsoft were created, were being like pretty early in the business. But there was a company that created a PDA device. Basically, you
Mm.
can access your email, you can have like phone contacts, you can call people, and so on and so forth. It was very expensive, right? But the people that created it thought like everybody would like to have that. I mean, that is like the number one business utility that you will want to have,
Yeah.
right? And that didn't take off mainly because people like said, I don't want to be reachable all the time. I mean, it wasn't the right time for that device to actually take off. And
Yeah.
then a few years afterwards, we have like smartphones, we have whatever.
There is an old saying that being early is the same thing as being wrong.
Yeah.
But I believe that the smartphone took off with post Apple. Actually, iPhone 1 was hype, but it was a hype mostly for um, the people that are Apple fans in general. With the Apple iPhone 3GS and so on and so forth, 3 whatever, the next iPhones, when the app market, the actually the platform for selling and building apps was created, because the first iPhone didn't have that. It came with pre-installed apps. Actually, that was the key innovation to making. There were similar phones with similar functionality before that, but that exploded because instantly you had this plethora of apps that can do whatever.
Yeah, I remember. I remember actually the marketing then. I think that the slogan was, there is an app for that, right?
Yeah.
So basically, that took off. You're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, because regardless what you had, the game changer wasn't the iPhone, the original iPhone, because to a large extent you got a device, and that device was preset with some things it can do, and that was it. But later, once we had the second and third generation with the iPhone, and then we had the market for apps and so on. That was the real game changer, and that made the whole ecosystem actually so successful. And by the way, I think that a lot of there are different types of like hype cycles feed in a different manner. Some of them feed basically have the prerequisites all in place, and they're useful, and the more they're used, the more useful they get. Example, the apps market. The more developers you get into those markets to create useful apps and so on, the more useful the system becomes, the more people use it, the more people have basically the more monetization gets to the developers, and it's a positive feedback loop.
That one of the things that basically drives the wave of a hype is actually the ecosystem that starts supporting it, especially in open source. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of build up hypes in open source. I work on the front end, and I should know. I mean, every day there is a new framework,
Yeah.
right? That was a joke, but the ecosystem is the one that drives a lot of the things. So if you have like a huge ecosystem, a huge support, right, from people, that will build up, and that will reach, almost certainly it will reach that plateau that we talked about, right, of productivity, and it will become stable, and it will become widely used. But if there aren't a lot of people that are taking up that technology, that let's say framework or whatever, probably it would not reach that stage.
So and by the way, there are three major ways to grow every ecosystem. So the positive feedback loop, where it grows by itself, is a great example of hypes that will last, regardless what happens with them in the long run. They definitely change, but they do make an impact. Other hypes, you mentioned VR, but I think that for the last, I don't know how many years, at least the last 7 or 8 years, different companies like Google, Apple, Meta most recently,
Yeah.
try to sell an idea to the public, and nobody understands how to get something out of that idea, because they say basically, yeah, it's pretty cool, use it. That's not enough for a hype to happen. Basically, and that is an old saying with the product circles. But basically, when you build a product, everyone involved with that product must get something out of that product for the hype to perpetuate itself. Otherwise, you are either paying for that hype to sustain. Basically, until the developers get there, you must pay for apps to be developed or whatever. You must feed part of that ecosystem for it to be alive. Once it reaches a critical mass, it might be sustainable, it might not be sustainable. The problem is, first, the video headsets or whatever are with us since the 80s. And they were sold for whatever reasons. Of course, they were pretty cool. You can interact, you can blah, blah, blah. But they didn't offer any major improvement over what we had already. The things we do, we can do it with our phone. Why the heck should we buy an expensive gadget like that?
And there it comes, like the social aspect that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, is that the brain looks for the easy way.
Yeah.
Right. It looks for something that will solve a problem faster. And here's an example: React, for instance, or any other framework that came out in recent years. It aims to solve specifically that. Right. Why React actually took off that much is basically because of the backing of a large company. In this case, they created the wave, they created the hype.
Mm-hmm.
And the main aim for React was to be easier for new developers, for new engineers to be introduced into working on the front end. It made it way easier, and with every single step and update, they made it even easier, which is both like a solution to a problem and a problem for the solution. Here is what I mean. So basically, when React first came out, it solved a lot of problems in the rendering engine, right? It made it easier to develop applications. You didn't have to worry about rendering and whatever, which is pretty cool. And then hooks actually came out, and they made it even easier for new people to get on board. And I do remember one thing that that basically stood out in the documentation of the first like React version that introduced hooks. We decided, so it said something like that. So we decided to move more in a functional development direction, or a procedural functional mainly, because this keyword in class-based components is very confusing to a lot of people. So they made it even easier. So if you're like me if you're like me and you've worked on like front end and basically any programming language, you know what this keyword means,
Yeah.
right? And it is like, for me, it was like very.
We're talking about self for all the Python guys out there.
Yeah. But yeah, it is like baffling for me how who in their right mind will introduce like people to this framework that basically does not contain basic concepts of programming, right?
Yeah.
And this was like, for me, because I've been working with like object-oriented programming languages and class-based components for quite some time, but it was very, very interesting for me. But that actually solves a problem, and solves a very specific business problem.
But that makes me think, React kind of every, I don't know, 5 years reinvents itself and the problem it tries to tackle. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, originally it was created by Facebook to solve the DOM performance, the issues with low performance in DOM manipulations. It got the shadow
Exactly,
DOM,
yes.
and so it was created initially for a complex UI that was updated randomly and quite intensively, the Facebook UI basically.
Yeah.
And they hit some issues with basically directly manipulating the DOM. And they created React to solve that, and then they kind of, the purpose of React is ever changing, and it reinvents itself every few years.
It reinvents itself because when it solves one problem, it creates another. So specifically right now with the latest version of React, they introduce a compiler into another layer of abstraction. So they introduced a compiler because there were a lot of problems with memoization.
Yeah.
With hooks, basically, because you don't there is no object. You do have like references, but they are disguised behind hooks, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and that happens a lot. It does solve one problem, but it creates another. So for instance, it does solve a very specific business issue at that point. So as you said, right in the beginning, it was created to solve the problem of like manually updating the DOM and being updating the DOM efficiently. That is the initial idea. Then they introduced the flux pattern or Redux, which basically solved the problem of like redundant data or ambiguous data around the application. So you will have like a single source of truth. And then at some point, I think with the simplification of React, and again, a disclaimer, that is my opinion, but their aim was to solve the problem of the learning curve for new people to jump on, like working on front-end application, working on React, which made it way easier for new people to go into the business, and that solved the problem of the business not having enough resources to work on different applications, which then created another issue because everything is like so abstracted right now that people don't feel the need to understand actually how that works. But those are different.
That's been the path of software engineering since, I don't know.
Of course, yeah.
Since it's like 80 years old at least, and we are constantly building abstractions on top of abstractions on top of abstractions, and it seems to never stop. Some of those older technologies are more useful, it seems, than newer ones, and they span their lifespan. For example, we're still writing quite a hefty portion of the software in the world in C and C++. A lot of things are still developed. Even new developments are specifically developed in C and C++, although Rust as of late gives them a run for their money. But there are interesting topics there to discuss as well, because the Linux community is quite divided on Rust in the Linux kernel and so on. But my question was, when you spot a new hype, how do you differentiate between just another thing that a big tech company tries to sell us versus a real thing that will change our lives?
That's a very hard question. I mean, it is very hard to like distinguish which is going to be which of the two, right? Most of the time, if I have to be honest, through my experience, I can probably see which is going to be useful, which is going to solve real problems, not just a single problem, right? Because there are a lot of things that are coming out, and they solve like a very specific problem, a very narrow problem, which you can easily deduce that basically this is not something that is going to take off. It is going to be used for very specific purposes. It is going to be out there, but it's not going to build a community around it. It's not going to be widely supported. And it is going to be used for very specific niche thing.
Yeah.
Right. On the other hand, there are a lot of things that basically, even if you don't agree with them in the beginning, you actually see the prospects there, right?
Yeah.
Like with React, as I mentioned, it solved very specific business needs, and from there on, it took off basically because it had a great community, and it still has actually great community, and ever actually growing community that supports it, that suggests fixes to a lot of the problems that basically have been created or are going to be had like in the future. So this is something that even if you don't agree with, you can actually see the need for it. And from your experience, you can actually see the need.
Yeah, but that's specifically if you're in that industry.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are in programming and a new framework or library or whatever new language comes up, and you use it and find it really beneficial, that's one thing. But something that has a cross-cutting um, influence over society, like the smartphone, for example,
Okay.
that how can you, because they're always early adopters, that whatever the technology, I I bet that a lot of tech guys have an Apple Vision Pro in their closet right now and regret buying it. But a lot of people um, try out new stuff. They might find it useful, not find it useful, but the technology or the new invention grows or doesn't, regardless of the early adopters in most cases, when it's cross-cutting, I mean. So there are a lot of hypes that either do happen or do not happen, as we already discussed, but how can you spot a hype that will definitely make a change and make an impact early on, even before it's so prominent?
That's that's a very hard question. So if we talk in terms of technology, I mean in terms of like engineering, programming and stuff like that, you can probably, through your experience, you can probably deduce which actually library or technology or framework will actually take off. It is something that can probably solve issues that you have, the community has. So for instance, we talked about React. React actually is something like that. Even though in the beginning, if you don't see, like you're, let's say, against it, or you're not like very keen of using it, you can actually see what it can solve. So initially, React was introduced specifically for rendering DOM elements, right, in the browser, because it was very inefficient. It took a lot of time to optimize by hand. So basically, they did React as a rendering library. After that, they needed something. So Facebook basically needed something to centralize the data, or basically the UI data that is being used in applications. So they did the Fox pattern, or Redux as we know it right now. Basically, those things, right from the beginning, you can actually see their usefulness. You might not be an early adopter. Basically, you want to see what is happening, but there will be a lot of people that will try it. And then, if that is useful enough, it will build a community around it that will support it, that will solve its issues, and all that. So I would say like probably experience, or yeah.
Okay, but if you're outside of the tech world and you're just an ordinary gal or a guy, how do you spot a technology or a new invention that will make an impact on the wider audience, regardless what sphere of work you focus on?
You mean like more of a cross-cutting tech
Yeah,
something?
like the smartphone, for example.
Okay. Well, I think that is driven by the social aspect, or the social reality that people are experiencing in the current age.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned earlier for that smart device that was like before even the smartphone, but it wasn't widely accepted. It was mainly because that wasn't the reality for the people back then,
Mm.
right? So if it wasn't the right time to release that. So as you mentioned, like what was the saying?
Being early is the same as being wrong.
Yeah, being early is the same as being wrong. So it is something that needs to be useful and needs to be useful at that
Yeah.
time, at that time. Um, and even if you create a device that is useful like 10 years in the future, it's already been outdated, right? So it is, as you said, like being wrong in this case.
I usually, by the way, when I have to make such decisions or think about technologies or inventions or whatever that will make an impact, I try to think of all the prerequisites are there in place, because a lot of technology and inventions come before their time. But if you think of all the necessary things about technology to be there, for example, AI in it, especially large language models, will probably never be useful on a small device because they take too much power, they take too much computing, and probably will be in some way, shape, or form mostly in the cloud. So they're a cloud technology. So when we talk about, hey, can we use chatbots? Yeah, you can, but that means you are tying yourself to a cloud technology. That means you can use it online, of course, from a device that is a dumb client, basically, and sends data over. But then, pretty much since the beginning, you spot some constraints or some prerequisites, in this case, compute power for AI models, that they cannot live without. And regardless, with time, usually the trend is they need more compute and they need more, not just compute, storage even. Try
Yeah.
storing hundreds of billions of parameters model on your smartphone. So there are some things that are prerequisites which shape the way the thing is used, because there are constraints on how it can be run engineering, speaking from engineering experience. So when you find some dependencies, you already can see where the road is going for a particular technology, because you can see the roads that it cannot go even if it wished to. So that's one of the things, and in some cases you see no relevant paths going forward, because it's not more useful, it's expensive, proliferation and actually penetrating the market is quite hard, and there were a lot of we mentioned some of that tech, but you can see more clearly the path, and estimate the path that the technology will not take rather than the path that it will take. But to give an example, um, and again, let's make it with AI. Why not? Um, AI is basically it does not blur the P versus NP and all that stuff. The hard problems are still hard to solve, but it gives us a brute force way into an empirical solution to some types of computational problems, and that gives me the hope that some of those problems have easy solutions that we weren't able to figure out, but AI can give us just by brute forcing, for example, protein folding and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So my hopes with specifically with AI, and bear in mind another thing, with AI, my hopes are that biosciences, molecular biology, and quite a few, so pharmaceuticals and other sub industries will benefit immensely from AI. But the important thing here is when you ask people about the future, and that's my question, and with that I'll give the mic to you, so to speak. is when you ask people what the relevant technologies in the future are, they just extrapolate for the technologies that are relevant today. So 100 years before us, everyone was thinking everything will be uh, zeppelins and railway cars and just more of that. We are now thinking everything will be AI and just have more of that. And yeah, and maybe it will be biotech just because the prerequisites are there. We have lots of data. We have AI models, certain AI models, and the compute power to actually execute and train them with that data. And we might find shortcuts to some problems in biology or pharmaceuticals or whatever. Find cures to some illnesses and so on. But most definitely the next big hype will not be something we currently can extrapolate just by having more of the same, is my thesis here.
Okay, so what was the question specifically
How
for
do
AI?
you, yes, the question is, um, how do you, what do you think will the next great hype be, and how will we be able to spot it?
Okay, so if we're talking like in terms of AI, actually it will so the next big thing is going to be something hardware related. I, I I cannot say specifically what, but it is going to be related. Again, it will benefit from AI, and it will benefit AI as well. But it is something that is related to hardware chips. Like, is it going to be like related to quantum computing? I highly doubt that, but let's keep an open mind. But it is something that is going to be related to computing, to hardware, and specifically how we do computing. Um, Specifically, the energy needed for the compute that we do like use up right now will be lessened. So that is one of the things that basically we do have the prerequisites, and we do have like the teams working on that currently. But it will be triggered from some kind of like breakthrough in science and specifically in physics, I think. But this is like ahead, very very ahead in the future, right?
One thing that I think is underutilized and can be actually it's being experimented on is analog circuitry
Yes.
for AI, and not just AI, for computation in more general terms, because it gives a lot of opportunities to actually do computing in a different way. Um, One thing that holds my enthusiasm in this regard is we've been with pretty much the same computational models and architectures of computing since the last 100 years,
Yeah.
almost 100 years.
We've reached, I think, the peak here.
Yeah, we are doing just the law of diminishing returns. We're investing more and more for ever smaller
Yeah.
outcomes and smaller improvements. So definitely, I don't believe that quantum computing is going to be a major breakthrough because of a lot of issues. And even if it is a breakthrough, it will be a breakthrough in a few specific topics. It can give us, of course, advances in medicine. It will bring down all current encryption that we use, and that will be a bad thing. But I don't believe it will make a major difference in the wider way we live and penetrate all our lives. And
But that was also thought of like the first computers, like IBM, like the big
Mhm.
racks that they had like at NASA when they launched like the Apollo mission.
Yeah, because they didn't think that most people will have computing needs that need such a hardware.
Yeah.
And that was true at the time, but once you can create a market for such computing needs, because digital TV or gaming or whatever is again creates a need for computational power at our fingertips, which you don't have if you don't. So it feeds. Basically, once you have the device, you can create the need for the usage of that device, and it's a self-perpetuating cycle.
So if we think about actually, because while we were talking, I was thinking about specifically like what kind of hardware like solutions will be used in the recent years, right? In the upcoming years. And specifically, I did mention that AI will have like a huge impact on healthcare, I think. And there is something that I did think about while watching. There was a YouTube video specifically for the harms of AI, right? How it can analyze brain waves or whatever, or it can distinguish like people's positions in a room based on like radio signals.
Yeah.
I think you watched that. I can't
Yeah.
remember what it was called, but my first thought back then was, because they were like very much focusing on the negatives of how AI is going to be used. But my first thought was basically it can analyze patterns in brain waves. So what it can do, like think about it like that. If you have a chip, a small enough chip that can be powered with a small battery that can like hold a model that can analyze brain waves, and you can introduce it into a prosthetic, it will change the life of people with lost limbs by a huge margin, right? So this is like one of aspects of like using hardware with AI and just introducing a better future for most people.
Yeah.
But that is because I was while we were talking, I was thinking about what actually might come in the near future. Hopefully that is what it comes, because those chips can be used for like quite harmful things.
Yeah, and those chips can be used for actually remote control of weapons, whatever.
Yeah.
So technology has no moral grounds. It can be used for whatever as long as it's applicable. And I do believe that other aspects in other sciences, because currently we're living in the information age, and as I've said multiple times, it will end someday. It wouldn't end because we no longer use information, just as the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. So the next big thing will probably be in some other aspect. It might not be information, it might be bioscience, it might be whatever, gene manipulation or whatever. But definitely it will be something that's based on the technologies that are built today. So think of what those technologies enable in terms of innovation, and not specifically about the technologies that, hey, we are now in the AI hype cycle, so everything will be AI in the future. No, but this AI will enable some future hypes that will happen. And that's the interesting part, because it will be something we don't expect, or at least that's my opinion.
It will be something like with converging technologies.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the hype cycle, by the way, becomes shorter and shorter as time progresses. To give an example, the railway craze took like 50 years. Now the average hype cycle is 7 years or less. And in high tech, it's even shorter, like 4 or 5 years. So definitely the next big thing is around the corner, but at least I think it's something that we have never expected, and that's the interesting part.
Yeah, I do believe that as you mentioned, I do believe that a lot of what comes here it will be a combination of a lot of converging technologies. You mentioned gene engineering, you mentioned biotech, we mentioned AI. Maybe it will be a combination. Maybe AI will actually enable that combination, the like the glue that can fit everything together. But it will be something new. It will be something that And we were talking about the next big thing, right? It's not going to be the next framework, like front-end framework. It's going to be the next big thing that is going to change a lot of aspects of in socio-economic aspects as well.
And last question, but I believe it's quite an interesting thing to ask. What's your opinion on when should we invest as companies, as people? As people, we invest primarily our time, but when it's the right time to invest with a new hype. So, of course, there is the early adopters, and
Mhm.
we can be early adopters at everything we see, or we can wait out the hype, wait for the maturity of a technology or invention. So, what's your stand on that? Should we go one way or the other? Pros, cons, and what do you think is the better approach?
There is not like a rule of thumb, in my opinion, here. Let's say as a person investing your time, it's always going to be a positive, even if it's not something that is going to take off. Like that experience that you're going to get is going to be always something that you gain, and we do gain like experience from that kind of interactions with technology,
Mm-hmm.
and not only technology, with people as well. If we're talking about like financial investments, it's if you like a person that is like thinking about investing into a company that does a specific thing that is hyped up right now, I would suggest to like just wait a little bit to see the stability of what is being done, because there has been a lot of like investments in space technologies that they didn't even like finish, didn't do anything. I mean, they're like they were like a black hole for financials. Um, as a company, because as a company, and specifically if you're a tech company, when investing into a technology, you do both. You do financial investment, and you also do like time investment from the people that you work with, from the clients that you work with, and so on and so forth. Here, I think you can basically go with when you see a usefulness from some kind of technology, when you see something that you can solve with that technology, even if it's not on the market yet, but you will see like the benefits that may come from it, then you invest. So for instance, AI. A lot of companies started to invest in AI basically because it's hyped, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't know how AI will solve certain problems. That is why we have like this widely spread misconception of AI can solve everything. I can automate the whole process. That's not the case.
Yeah.
AI can solve like very specific problems in very specific scenarios. And when you know that, and when you know what kind of scenario you will solve with it, then you invest. I think that's something that.
From my perspective, from people perspective, I don't believe that it's a choice. Some people are just built in such a way that they want to try the latest and greatest, be on the cutting edge always, and not basically the early adopter mindset. And those are like 5% of the population and so on. Most of the people stand on the fence and wait for the
Yeah.
technology to mature. And it's not so much of a choice as basically that's a trait of character most of the time. As companies go, it's first of all, don't believe hypes. Be skeptical about hypes. Don't invest in a technology just because you get your, for example, executive management meeting or board meeting and say, hey, what are we doing about AI? We should do something about AI. That's not a right incentive. Try to educate yourselves about what the technology really offers and what it doesn't offer, because investing time from the perspective of a company, when you invest in something, you don't invest in something else. You cannot invest in everything. By saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to 5 others. So sometimes you'll see that a lot of companies that you interact with are asking about certain technologies or discussing it. Your competitors are talking about it. Don't feel the pressure because of that. Try to understand the technology. Try to find whether it fits or it enhances your business model or gives you something. If it doesn't, try to find something else. There's a lot of hypes going on at the same time. And one of the good tools that I found throughout the years are such as tech radars or innovation radars. Basically, it's a circular diagram, and a lot of companies, by the way, have such and maintain such. Basically, the more you go to the center, the more used and useful the technology is. And if you see that new innovations are coming from outside all the time, see the trends, because those diagrams have a trend. Where was that technology last year? Where was the year before? And if you see a straight trend towards the center, that means it becomes useful. There is a lot of tech that appears and sits for 3 years in a row in the outmost circle of the radar. That is not a good sign for a technology. So if you see that something every single year is more useful and more adopted, more widely adopted
It
than
grows,
before.
right?
Yes.
It grows.
And then business models, that means indirectly, that means that business models are found and actually it can pay for itself and everything else. And it means is a technology that is going to stay. But even if it's going to stay, you shouldn't necessarily as a business care about that technology unless it enhances your business model or gives you new opportunities for business models to explore that you didn't have before, like banking from your mobile phone or whatever. But be careful and just try to cut through the hype and understand what's beneath, and just consult with tech people that understand the technology and have tried it. Is it possible to do this? Is it possible to do that? What are the constraints? Think of those constraints that the technology cannot overcome, such as energy consumption with AI, for example. That will eliminate a whole range of solutions with that technology from your book instantly, if energy is an issue with you. So that's my 5 cents. Do you want to add some closing words?
I don't think so. I mean, I absolutely agree with what you said, and there are a few points that are very good to know, and I'm very glad that you mentioned them specifically for like the business case. Does it enhance your business? Does it enhance what you do? And this is like really important, because people cannot do everything, right? You need to focus on specific things, and there will be risks, and there will be sometimes that you need to take bigger risks to get bigger gains. But it is something that should be fully analyzed beforehand.
Yeah, because I've heard throughout the recent years, it was, what are we doing with AI? Before that was, what are we doing with RPA? Before that was, what are we doing with blockchain? Before that was something else, and it's constantly one thing after the other.
It was IoT. It was like, what are we doing with VR? What are we doing like with even if we're talking about like innovation in gaming, like what are we doing with ray tracing, right, and so on and so forth. But
so my closing words are: don't feel the pressure to use technology. It's an end. It's not an ends. It's means. So try to fit the technology to what you are doing, and use it as a means to your end. And technology is never an end. and don't feel the pressure to use it just because it's trendy. Try to understand it, and then if it's useful to you, it might change your business, but if it's not, don't feel the pressure.
That is very important. Do your research beforehand.
Yeah. Or contact companies such as ours and have a conversation about a specific technology. So thanks again for taking time to have a listen to our conversations. Hopefully the questions and the topics were interesting and enlightening, and see you on the next one. Thanks.